Happy Friday and welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch. Thank you so much for joining me for this one of the last episodes of 2024. We will be back next week with a new episode of Searchlight, pretty interesting one where you're going to get my insights about being boots on ground looking for a missing person. But this week, we're looking into an old, but investigators would be very clear with you, it's not a cold case, and it never was. On October 27, 1989, a young patrolman by the name of Mark Spetzel in Bay Village, Ohio, spoke to a fifth grade class about stranger danger. In that class was 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic, and later that day, she'd go missing. Just a few months later, her body would be found in a field. This would launch one of the FBI's longest-running investigations to date, and now, 35 years later, it's still unsolved, but investigators are closer than ever. Do you have the pieces that can help them fill in those gaps? They believe that the killer kept souvenirs. A turquoise horse earring, black ankle boots, and a leather binder have never been recovered, and we know that Amy had those items. I'm going to take you through the history all the way from the start of the missing persons investigation through, thankfully, very regular discoveries that have happened over the past 10 or 12 years, so that you have a complete picture, and please share this with anyone that you think could be helpful to this case. 35 years is a long time to be waiting for justice, and Amy's father and brother are still waiting for that. Let's get started by learning about where this takes place with a quick stop at Wikipedia. Bay Village, Ohio. Bay Village is a city in western Cuyahoga County, Ohio, United States. Located along the southern shore of Lake Erie, the city is a western suburb of Cleveland and part of the Cleveland metropolitan area. The population was 16,163 as of the 2020 census. Of course, this is happening right at the end of the 1980s into the 1990s, and it looks like it was about 17,000 at that time, so actually a little higher than it is now. We're going to be leaning on newspapers.com and specifically a newspaper called The Plain Dealer, and I just want to thank them for covering this case so strongly. They had dozens of articles. I mean, she goes missing in October, and even before the end of that year, I think I had 50 different references to look through in terms of different pages of newspapers just from them that were speaking about Amy's case. But this is one of the earliest ones. Bay Village police seek girl who failed to return home. Bay Village police and residents combed the city last night looking for 10-year-old Amy Renee Mihaljevic of Linford Drive. She was last seen at about 3:30 p.m. with two classmates at the Bay Square Shopping Center on Wolf Road near Dover Center Road, police said. Her bicycle was still at Bay Middle School, where she was a fifth grader. She was reported missing by her mother shortly before 6 p.m. She normally arrives home from school around 3:15. She was last seen at the shopping center shortly after 5 p.m. by an adult who knew her, but nothing seemed unusual. She told the classmates that she was waiting for a ride and someone was coming to pick her up. Now, an interesting aspect to this is that she would always call her mom. It was usual for her to be home with her brother at this time and neither parent to be there. Their father was actually away on a work trip during this. He worked for General Motors at the time. Her mother worked for a newspaper, had recently been promoted to a full-time position, but it was regular for no parent to be at home when the kids got home from school. Amy would typically call her mom. And what's interesting about this day is it seems like she laid out a bit of an excuse about having choir practice on this day, which is strange, and we'll get to why. But she still made that phone call to her mom, even though she wasn't at home. And apparently kind of fooled her mom into thinking that she actually was. So it seems like this person that was coming to pick her up got her, but then allowed her to make a phone call to her mother. And thinking about someone that's abducting someone, that sounds really risky, not very well thought out. The benefit, I guess, of it would be to try to delay any investigation. But what's that going to do? It's only going to delay it by a matter of maybe, a few hours, which, I mean, I guess if you look at it from that way, it did work effectively. But let's take a look at a map so we can get a little bit of a sense of where this is taking place. This is the Bay Village Square Shopping Center. And there is a very interesting point to note about this area. So this is the shopping center. There was an ice cream shop that used to be here. Pretty much the same layout. I think at the time there wasn't quite as many stores in here, but all the building was still laid out exactly this way. But right across the street in what kind of looks like a government building here, at the time, this was the police station, the local police station. So you had officers that had a view of this. So once again, if this is being coordinated by someone who's trying to think out a child abduction, it seems like there's just not a lot of strong planning going in. Of course, here we are 35 years later, we're still looking for this person. On October 29th, this is an article from the Plain Dealer, Bay Village girl 10 apparently abducted. So very quickly we would go from, I think she was mentioned on the 14th page back when she was a missing person, and it would be literally the next day she would hit the front page and with this news that they think that she's been abducted. Bay Village Police and the FBI are investigating the apparent abduction of a 10-year-old girl last seen Friday afternoon talking to a man at a shopping center. Lieutenant Richard Wilson said police began suspecting foul play in Amy Renee Mihaljevic's disappearance after talking to classmates who said that she told them that a family friend whom she had not met intended to take her on a shopping spree after school Friday. Between sobs, her mother, Margaret, said that her daughter had lied about attending a practice session for the Bay Middle School choir on Friday. She said that she knew nothing about the shopping spree, but said that her daughter was taught to accept rides only from a few neighbors. And it's just another interesting point with this. Like, she had a police officer in her classroom that day talking to her about stranger danger. Here we can see an early sketch of the suspect. This happened in a shopping center on a Friday afternoon at a pretty busy time. Plus, it was a popular place for the kids from school to go hang out because of the ice cream shop. So there was a couple of classmates that actually saw her interacting with this guy. So there was enough information to get a sketch together pretty quickly. I'm going to lean on this article really heavily because these details early on in investigations like this just seem to dry up and disappear. And especially when you have a shift in the investigation like we do with this one, once they get to finding her body. So let's continue just getting every detail we can out of this article. Miss Mihaljevic, the mother, said that her son, Jason, phoned her at 3:10 p.m. Friday at Trade and Times newspaper in Westlake where she works. He said, "Amy's not home." I said, "Oh, that's all right. She asked permission that morning to stay after for the choir practice. I didn't think anything of it." Both children call her every day when they get home from school. 10 or 20 minutes after Jason called, Amy phoned. Miss Mihaljevic assumed that her daughter was calling from home. She seemed quiet, her mother said. I had asked her how the practice went. She said that the choir met on Wednesday and Thursday. And I said, "Wait a minute, this is Friday. Why are you there?" She didn't say anything. I said, "Is this kind of like an audition or something?" And she said, "Yeah, it was for the new people." No choir practice or tryout was scheduled for Friday afternoon, of course. Police have not determined where Amy was when she called her mother. Then her mother gets home at about 5:30 and discovers that Amy's missing. She goes to the police and they start, she also organizes search efforts. They go to Amy's school and they find that her bike is still there. "We can't remember Amy ever telling a fib," said her father, Mark, a GM employee who said that he came home around 6:30. Amy was under stress from the amount of homework she was facing in her accelerated programs and had a couple of tiffs with her friends, her mom said. But other than that, her principal says she was an excellent student, and as far as he knew, she was fine on Friday. It also speaks a bit here about Amy's love of horses. She had taken horseback riding lessons. And I think that speaks a little bit to one of the items that's still missing, which is an earring that has a horse on it. Now, she also didn't go to that shopping center alone. Two classmates said that they and Amy went into the Baskin-Robbins 31 ice cream store at the shopping center, and they left her outside the store and returned home at about 2:45. So we have other students that are there with her, friends of hers, but they leave and Amy seems to hang behind. Now, something that's not really mentioned here, and honestly, I didn't run into it in any of the articles, and keep in mind, this is a 35-year-old case. There's a ton of media on this. I've gone through a lot, but I obviously have not gone through everything. I did watch a Dateline episode that has Josh Mankiewicz on it. Great episode, of course. But there's a mention in that about a possible sighting of Amy with a man at a mall, not this strip mall, but at like an actual bigger mall that's about 6 miles away from here. And I was just looking for more information on that, and I really just can't find it. It kind of doesn't fit things very well in my mind. I mean, if we do have someone that's intending to kidnap a child like this, what's the benefit? Once they're in the car, what would the benefit be of, well, I'm actually going to have to take them to the mall? Why? Like, why are you going to continue the ruse that far? I even spoke to someone that looked into this case, a professional, that looked into this case for a while. And they also told me, I asked them specifically about that component. I'm like, that thing just, it kind of throws everything in a direction I don't understand. It was there as a professional. It was also their opinion that basically it's a bad sighting, that she was not at the larger mall at any point in that day. But it's interesting to me because Dateline brought it up and they didn't really hit it with a strong enough source. I mean, it's a witness sighting, but it's just one of those things where, you know, the more you do this stuff, I think the more leery you get of witness sightings. And I know people want to be helpful. People always want to be helpful in these cases, but sometimes, you know, that can cross wires with our desire to be helpful as opposed to actually having the information that can be helpful. Of course, numerous searches happen. We can see a picture here of a pond that's being searched. We have law enforcement. We have FBI that's involved with this case from very early on. They will also do some updates in terms of the composite sketches, which we'll get to in a moment here. But in terms of anything being found, all we come across is this one mention. Wilson said that a pair of sweatpants found in woods shortly after Amy's disappearance were similar to a pair worn by Amy when she disappeared on October 27th. He said that the FBI was conducting DNA tests on the pants in Washington, D.C. We're looking for something to directly link her to the pants, he said. Now, of course, I already told you guys that her body would be found. Her body would be found with her sweatpants. So unfortunately, this pair of pants that was found, not related to the case, but they do find her pants. And of course, searching those for DNA, we're going to find is actually still going on even up to recent years. $10,000 reward initially offered here. That would, and I just want to note, it was made available by the Cleveland area Better Buick dealers. So basically her father's work is kicking in to get this initial reward funded. It would grow. There'd be numerous organizations, including law enforcement organizations, that would keep swelling this reward. I think the biggest that I saw it get to is about $50,000. I'm not sure what it's currently at, but I'm sure there's some form of reward still on this because I know law enforcement wants this case solved. You've got the FBI working on it as one of their longest open investigations. Now we get to a really interesting thing. So as they are looking into this case, they're kind of figuring out more details because Amy spoke to her friends about someone that was calling her at home, this family member. And the family member was calling around the time that she would get home. The story that it's interesting. It seems to change because at first it seems like it's a family member. Then it seems, no, it's like a close friend of the family. But the story that this person, we're assuming is a man, is saying to Amy is that your mother has been promoted recently, which it seems like is valid. At least, I don't know if it's a promotion, but there's a change from her part-time work to now being full-time. But the story he's telling Amy is, we need to get a gift for your mother, and I'll take you. And not only will we get her a gift, we'll get you a gift as well. So they start kind of getting a bit of an MO for how this guy spoke to her in those phone calls. And they start putting some of that information out in the press. And then they start hearing from some other people that other children have been called with very, very similar stories, a very similar approach that's been used. So this from October 31st, once again, the Plain Dealer. A 10-year-old Bay Village girl believed abducted from a local shopping center Friday was called before her disappearance by a man who promised to buy the girl's mother a present for a job promotion, a neighbor said yesterday. The girl, Amy Mihaljevic, later got a second call from the man who led her to believe that she would get presents for herself as well, said the neighbor, Riley Bonham. Bonham, a neighbor for 4 years who claimed his daughter, Kristen, 11 years old, was best friends with Amy, said Margaret Mihaljevic, the girl's mother, actually had received no promotion at Trading Times, the Westlake newspaper where she works. Again, that's kind of conflicting with some of the information that I have seen that she went from a part-time to a full-time position. I don't know if you would consider that a promotion. Police received information about the calls from interviews with friends of Amy's, said Bonham, who described himself as a close friend of the family. Amy had not told her parents of the planned shopping spree because the present buying was supposed to be a secret. Basically, he kind of was putting it to her under the guise that this needs to be a surprise for your mother. As a matter of fact, don't even tell your brother about this because we know that he's no good with secrets. And even that line of dialogue would lead you to believe this is someone that might actually know the family. And investigators are certainly considering that possibility around all this. Like I mentioned, the FBI gets involved here. They go back to the witnesses. They make new composites. The reason why there's a bit of variance is because these composites were made from two separate people that saw the same guy, but basically these two people were at opposite ends of the shopping center and their points of view were somewhat different. What seems to be consistent about this is his age is 30 to 35. He's standing somewhere between 5'8" to 5 feet 10 inches tall. And we can see outside of the glasses, these descriptions both seem fairly strong and fairly similar. Now, what about those other phone calls I was telling you about? Here we go. Phone ploy was repeatedly tried before. Bay Village Police Chief William E. Garreau said yesterday that similar calls were made to a North Olmsted girl in April and to a girl in an eastern suburb in March. In each case, those girls hung up, Garreau said, but the calls were very similar. We're looking for a common thread. He asked that anyone who may have received a similar phone call to contact Bay Village Police, and they would be contacted about numerous phone calls, but I've only heard of these two specifically where the conversation on the phone seems to be a match. A lot of the other ones were just kind of strange phone calls, strange for varying reasons. As a matter of fact, in that Dateline episode that I had watched, they interviewed both of those women who didn't want to be identified, but they did actually talk to them. So you can check that out. It's available online. You don't need any special services or anything to watch it at Dateline's website. Bay Village Police and the FBI have questioned a North Olmsted man who left work at noon and didn't return on October 27th, the day that Amy disappeared. Lieutenant Richard Wilson said that the man is in his mid-30s and resembles the composite of the suspect in Amy's abduction. He said that the man, who has not been identified by police, voluntarily came to the police department for questioning. He was questioned by a team of Bay Village Police and FBI agents and later released. He declined to say what reason the man gave for leaving his job at a Westlake manufacturing plant where he works and not returning on October 27th. He was a subject we talked to regarding this investigation. He came in voluntarily and he cooperated with us, and he was released and went on his way, Wilson said. Wilson was non-committal as to whether the man was still a suspect. And this is a case that has had literally tens of thousands of tips at this point, as of today. But also many, many different people that you would consider persons of interest. Never any named suspects, although you might find internet dialogue about people that are suspects. I have found no official confirmation from police saying, like, this is an actual suspect. This is someone. They have been speaking pretty regularly about people that they look into. Like here we have on November 9th, a suspect in Louisiana named James Edward Vachuska was kind of considered, and they were looking at him. What's interesting about this is he kind of pops up, and admittedly, look at these composites. We got other composites. The one on the left is the initial police one. I'm not sure where the one on the right's coming from, but his features, not a bad match. I think his age range might be a bit young for the person that they're looking for, and his alibi is that I think he was at a college party the night that this happened. So initially there's this run of press that's kind of like, hey, look at this guy, and he looks like the composites. Then there's articles that come out a few days later that are like, nope, he's got an alibi. But then there's a reverse on the alibi even. Beaujeu City Police spokesman John Brand would not comment on whether James Edward Varchuska, 28 years old, has told police where he was the day that Amy disappeared. We can't comment on that because it wouldn't be right for the court case here, Brand said. We don't want to do anything to let this bugbear walk off, because if he walks, we're going to put him right back on a bus to Cleveland. This is a guy that has had numerous offenses, a few of them against underage children. So kind of a known problem when it comes to cases of this nature. Brand said Varchuska could have been in the Cleveland area when Amy disappeared. So basically, even though he had an alibi for that night, there must have been enough drive time for him to get back and forth. Although he was seen at a Halloween party in Shreveport, Louisiana about 9 p.m., Brand would not say if police had determined where he was for the rest of the day. So apparently possible for him to get back and forth there. Then, of course, we have Amy's birthday hit in early December. As a matter of fact, that's the day I'm recording this. If it is the same day of this article, her birthday, I think, was yesterday. Margaret and Mark Mihaljevic, you can see in this picture here, two parents completely devastated by everything going on with this case and not knowing that the worst of it is still to come. Police deny rumors that Amy was found alive. As so many of these cases go, there could be a lot of nonsense. It seems like possibly some small radio station heard some rumor and then broadcast it. Then a bunch of people started calling to confirm. And of course, this started impacting Bay Village Police Department. All of a sudden, they're receiving all these phone calls and having to tell people, no, she hasn't been found. Just one of the nutty things that can kind of happen around cases of this nature. And it's weird to look at it as a negative thing. You just have a lot of caring people that are looking to confirm the information because a whole community has been moved by this. And this is a story that would reach national exposure as well. Multiple television shows would cover this case. But in February of 1990, Amy Mihaljevic found slain. A 3-month search marked by candlelight vigils and a nationwide poster campaign for a missing Bay Village girl ended yesterday when her body was found by a jogger in a field in rural Ashland County. 10-year-old Amy Renee Mihaljevic died of 1 or 2 stab wounds to the left side of her neck and had also been hit in the back of the head with a blunt object, said Bay Village Police Chief William Garreau. Cuyahoga County Coroner Elizabeth Balraj used dental records to make a positive identification. Further tests will be conducted to determine whether the girl had been sexually assaulted and a more precise time of death. I still haven't seen details on that aspect, although based on what we're hearing about in terms of some of the DNA testing that's going on around that, particularly with her sweatpants, I believe there is a pretty strong possibility that there was a sexual assault. But there is no official confirmation that I've run into about that. 2 sources said Amy was wearing the outfit she was last seen in, green sweatpants and a lavender and green sweatshirt. She wasn't wearing shoes, the sources said. So I mentioned earlier there was some things missing, her shoes being one of them. A jogger, Janet Siebold of Ruggles Township, found Amy's body at around 7:30 a.m. along Ashland County Road 1181. The body was about 200 yards north of a farmhouse near a ditch at the northwest intersection of Ruggles Township Road 126 and County Road 1181. The area is about 50 miles southwest of Cleveland and, about 50 miles from the last place where Amy was seen. Siebold ran to the house of Patricia Kidd nearby and banged on the back door. Kidd quoted Siebold as saying, "I think I saw a dead body. Call the police, call the police." They phoned the sheriff at 7:43 a.m. Etzweiler said the body was decomposed. He said that Amy appeared to have been dead at least several months, but added he didn't know how long her body had been in the field. Similarities in age, height, weight, and hair color between the body and the description of Amy prompted the sheriff to call the FBI and Bay Village police. Interesting note about not knowing how long she had been in the field, because you have her discovered by a jogger, and we could hear by the description that she was just a little bit off the road. There are other local citizens that would speak up about this and say, there's no way that her body was out there the entire time. It's a road that we travel down all the time. It's a road that my children use to get to and from school. There's no way they wouldn't have noticed it. Other people have said, the smell of the decomposition would have tipped someone off to this as well. It's a bit of a question. The counter on that I would think is strange would be moving a body that's that badly decomposed. And if you're worried about evidence or traces and things like that, that just seems like a really risky proposition. We would learn in later years that her body might have been covered by something. And I'm assuming, this is just my assumption, that it could be that her body was covered up in that spot with some type of material that blended into the area decently and maybe obstructed the smell a little bit as well. And that's why people didn't see her. And at some point, either through weather or through wildlife, maybe the items that were covering her were moved or completely removed. And that's how we got to the discovery. I don't know, the possibility that someone would move a person that had obviously been dead for months, it just sounds risky, challenging. I don't know. I don't know if someone would do that, but maybe they would if her body was in a position where they were worried about it being discovered. So this is a map from the Bay Village Shopping Center to the area where she was found, about 54 miles, according to this map. So a bit of a drive, and I think a pretty obvious effort that we can see here in terms of getting her far away from where she might be identified and taking her out to a bit of a rural area where maybe they were hoping she would never be found. Although admittedly, with the location that she was found at and how close it was to the road, seems a little off, but here we can see law enforcement processing the scene where she was found. And on this map, we can also see that not only was it close to one road, is essentially close to two roads, and it looks like a train as well. So it looks like a lot of possibilities for different people to discover her there. But unfortunately, it would take several months. Meanwhile, Bay Village Police Lieutenant Richard Wilson said officials found items at the scene of evidentiary value. He declined to elaborate at this time. We're going to find out about some of those items in later years. Wilson also declined to comment on whether there was a suspect in the slaying, saying only that there were a few people who have turned up who are of interest to us. And I have to say, law enforcement has been very, very good about not leading public perception strongly in any particular direction, while still being able to acknowledge this case is a little interesting to us. We're going to look for a possible connection here. And someone else that would start doing a very good job in what a lot of people might think is an unexpected way, but I see it time and time again with these amazing families that I interact with. We have Amy's mother, Margaret, that reaches out to another mother of a missing teen named Dia Harris, and just to offer her help. And on top of that, they had collected so much money in terms of reward for Amy and for different search efforts that they were doing for Amy, that especially the money that they were going to use for search efforts they didn't need anymore. All of a sudden, Margaret starts offering rewards. And in Dia's case, she helped fund a reward for information on Dia as well. Unfortunately, Dia would be found to be deceased. And if you look into that story, it looks like it was an intimate partner homicide. But we see another picture of Amy's mother here, and that is a picture of her meeting Patty Wetterling, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Jacob Wetterling case. So we just have Amy's mother really start becoming a force for good in this area, at least through public perception. That's what it looks like. But honestly, on the back end, it looks like she is struggling. And I think a lot of people in this situation would tell you that even becoming this force for good and trying to be helpful to other people can be a way of trying to cope with unresolved feelings that you have about your own case. And when people are trying to cope in that way, they might also be trying to cope in other ways, as we're going to see here. Unfortunately, the relationship between Amy's parents would disintegrate in the months after her disappearance and her body being found. They would separate. Her mother would retake her maiden name, and she would move in with her mother, with Amy's grandmother, in Las Vegas, Nevada. And from there, it seems like things just did not get any easier, and her coping continued, and not in the healthiest of ways. This is an article from 2001 at Morning Journal. McNulty, that's her maiden name, 54, was found dead at her Las Vegas apartment from complications due to chronic alcoholism, according to the Clark County coroner in Nevada. Quote, "She could not get a real hold on a happy life anymore," said her mother, Henrietta, from her Las Vegas home. "Everything just turned her off. I'm sure this is what really brought on her death." McNulty, who filed for divorce from her ex-husband, Mark Mihaljevic, several months after the death of their daughter, moved from the Cleveland area to Las Vegas about a year ago to escape the media spotlight, her mother said. She had been living with her mother, but was asked to leave the apartment about a month ago because her mother said that her health was affected by her daughter's heavy smoking. "A very caring, loving person is gone who couldn't get her life back together," her mother said. After her daughter's death, McNulty formed the Community Fund for Assisting Missing Youth. So on top of the good that she was doing in those examples I was showing you, she actually even put an organization together. In its first 2 years, they educated approximately 47,000 children about the possible dangers that they may encounter with strangers. McNulty is survived by a son, Jason, who is a student at Kent State University. So another very tragic turn to this story that happens in the family. And Jason has now lost his mother and his sister. As we get to the following year, in 2002, we hear about another potential suspect. Richard A. Fulbert, 41 years old, walked down the center aisle of St. Angela Merici Catholic Church during the communion service and announced to the congregation that he killed Mihaljevic. A witness told a reporter that Fulbert was heard saying, "Can I have everybody's attention? You know me as Satan. I killed Amy Mihaljevic." An off-duty Fairview Park police sergeant and 2 auxiliary police officers attending the mass quickly took hold of Fulbert, took him out of the church, and placed him under arrest. Unfortunately, this would not be a legit confession, and it was one of many. Apparently, there was numerous people coming forward saying that they had been the ones to kill Amy. They were disproven, as would happen with this charge as well. He would wind up facing a charge for inducing panic, because not only did he say what we heard quoted in the last one, he also told the parishioners, "I'm going to kill you all." So that's why the 3 off-duty officers arrested him. Bay Village Police Chief David Wright said that his department receives about 1 tip per month in the Mihaljevic case. And I think they would still say that. Actually, I think one of the last stats I heard was it's more like 1 a week at this point. We get to another potential suspect here, Frank Dines Jr., a Seven Hills man who was sentenced to 16 years to life in prison for killing a mentally ill man, met with Bay Village detectives investigating Amy's abduction and slaying. Honestly, it's weird because they say it's based on him kind of looking like the composite photos, and I just don't see that at all. He admitted to shooting a man named Joseph Kopp. Kopp was estranged from his family for years and had been homeless, but he was living in the Dines' garage since October of 2009. Dines lived near the Kopp family, and Joe Kopp, after seeing a suspect's sketch in a newspaper, began telling people that Dines was involved in the girl's disappearance. At the time, there was nothing to indicate any further investigation, said now Lieutenant Mark Spetzel. rolling forward a little bit, he would actually eventually become chief of police there, still trying to move this case forward. And currently, I think he's in a neighboring community where he is now mayor. In light of the events of last year, we'll be taking another look at Dines and any involvement he may have had with the Mihaljevics. And I don't think a whole lot of this plays out. They did request his DNA, and because he's an inmate in Ohio, he's required to submit his DNA. So they had that. Do they have anything solid to test it against is an interesting question. And just them saying, hey, we're looking at this guy, we need his DNA, might lead you to assume that, well, they've got to have a profile that they're testing it against. They've got to have something that was found with her body. And when it comes to that, Spetzel said, we have not in the past, nor will we now discuss exactly what forensic evidence we possess. But I think it's fair that either they do have something or they think they might have something in the evidence they found with her, and they want the ability to run this DNA against that, even if they're waiting for technology to catch up in some way. 2014, so about 10 years ago, Mark Mihaljevic, Amy's father, is, believe it or not, optimistic. And that carries through to today. I've seen current articles where basically he's saying this exact same thing. I've never lost hope. It is going to happen. They're going to find her killer. And I certainly hope that happens while he's alive. I think he deserves that. Mark says he's grateful for all the help, especially that of the new Bay Village Chief of Police, Mark Spetzel. He was a young officer 25 years ago who spoke to Amy's class on the day she disappeared. He has never given up the search for her killer. Mark says, Chief Spetzel says he'll retire in a few years and needs to solve this case before he does. He spoke to her class that day. Don't tell me that he didn't beat himself up at night while he was laying down in bed thinking, what else could I have said? What other thing could I have done in the class that day that might have changed all this? Just a lot of really tough feelings and complexities that are going on with this case. And I think that's part of why it's hooked people in the way that it has and has kept experts working on it for as long as they have. I bet he's still keeping tabs on this case. I'd absolutely bet money on that. Over at cleveland.com, this from 2014 as well. Amy Mihaljevic investigation shifts to mother's acquaintances 25 years later. This is a really interesting shift, and I'm not exactly certain about the mechanics for it, but this is a shift that investigators are saying is important. They said it 10 years ago. They're still saying it today. They think there's some connectivity around Amy's mother that is part of this. Why? Let's see if we can learn here. Investigators are asking anyone who knew Amy's late mother, Margaret McNulty, to come forward with information, even if it seems insignificant. Cleveland FBI spokeswoman Special Agent Vicki Anderson said that it didn't take investigators long to determine the man knew the family well. He knew when he called Amy's home after school that she'd be alone. That's a really interesting point. He knew her mother had just gone from part-time to full-time at Trading Times. He knew she had a brother. Again, he made that comment about your brother can't keep a secret. He knew she needed to call her mom to tell her that she was home from school. Part of that weird justification about why would a kidnapper let a child speak to her mother? What if she yelled at that time who she was with? Or what if she couldn't get through that phone call without slipping up and like, oh, we're going to be getting you a surprise gift. And that could have, that phone call could have completely unraveled. Was he standing at the payphone with his finger just ready to hang that thing up if he detected it was going weird in any way? The emergence of composite sketches of a man witnesses say they saw Amy with at the shopping center the day of her disappearance may be leading down the wrong path, Anderson said. Now, I've looked into some online discussion about this case, and I can't find solid news sources to report on this aspect, so I don't want to lean into it too strongly. But there's online discussion about one person of interest who was also a teacher in the area. If you look at a picture of this guy from the time and look at the composites, it's pretty compelling. Here we have a spokesperson for the FBI saying that, you know what? Yeah, those composite sketches, they might be misleading us effectively. Was that teacher at the shopping center doing something else and was seen by some kids, and they got a composite of someone that is known to be in the community regularly? Maybe. This is a really interesting statement. It doesn't pop up in a whole lot of places, but yeah, we do have the FBI basically saying those composite sketches might be leading us down the wrong path. It's hard to know because we don't know the answer. They could be spot on. And through this time frame, kind of 2012, 2014, now we're at 2016, it seems like every few years there's some type of new information that is shared, which I think is really good processing by the police, just in terms of keeping the public talking about this, trying to put new things in play. I wish other police departments would look at this as an example of doing this right. And we're talking about a case that's still unsolved, but it is so recognizable to me what they're doing here. There's almost like a major update that's going to happen every 2 years from this point forward. And in terms of major updates, it's really just a little bit more information that law enforcement's opening up, combined with some technology aspects that are pushing this case forward as well. But this curtain, super unique because it's handmade. So they put this image out and start hoping that someone might recognize it. You know, if you were a little kid and you went over to your best friend's house, like maybe you would notice this curtain. There's things about it that stand out to me, just in terms of the size of it and the way it's been designed. You know, how many windows do you have that are this long? Like if you're thinking, it immediately makes me think of a door of some kind. Like, honestly, it could even just be for a door. You know, like if you had a big glass door and you just wanted the ability to cover it up, because it seems like it's the right shape, or like a sliding glass door, but it's not wide enough to really be effective as a curtain for being completely closed in that way. You would think maybe for decoration, like if it's just a curtain that's supposed to be at the side of the bar, that maybe you would kind of bunch up in the middle, like, you know, wrap it together, have it pinched in the middle. But if it was for decoration, is it really going to be this kind of homemade thing like this? I don't know. I always catch myself looking at intent with things. What's the intent of making this curtain this way? Has me. Because it seems like it's the shape of a door to me. I don't have windows in my house that go all the way to the floor unless they're attached to a door. I don't know. Maybe that'll help someone's recollection of what this thing is. And also a blanket that was found. These items found at the scene with Amy's body. Investigators believe that a homemade curtain found in a ditch in 1989, along with 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic's body, might hold clues to finding her killer. Retired FBI detective Phil Torsney was brought back to the case 3 years ago and found, among other evidence being re-examined, new significance to the curtain and a blanket that were found in a ditch alongside the road where Mihaljevic's body was discovered. That's the other thing about the blanket to me. If this was, I believe it was a wheat field that she was found in. If she was wrapped in this color, I could see that blending right into the field and people not knowing about it. Until something removes the blanket. Forensic investigators were able to match dog hair on the curtain as well as the blanket, which Torsney says is unique and appears to be hand-sewn out of a quilt fabric, to hairs that investigators collected in 1989 of Mihaljevic's dog, Jake. She was a bit of an animal lover, and I think she might have had 2 different dogs, because I saw another article that was referencing a dog named Bear, but also apparently a dog named Jake. If the curtain or blanket can be identified, it could lead detectives to Amy's killer. So they're tying those items pretty strongly to her body. I think it's a pretty firm conclusion that these items were wrapped around her body. Her body had hair from her dog on it. It was transferred to these items. But if these items came from the home of the suspect, what are the odds that there is other evidence on there that could be analyzed and found? Where's the DNA of people that lived in that home or animals that were in that home? The blanket is a generic beige fabric. The curtain is made out of an avocado green cotton quilt. It's hand sewn with bindings at the top and the bottom. We're hoping that someone recognizes it, Torsney said. If somebody can call us saying, my mom made this curtain, my grandma made this curtain, it was hanging in my brother's room, whatever it is, we can solve this case. I think that's a great point, and I think that these items are really important. However, of course, we're coming up on 8 years since this information is being released, and this case is still unsolved. So those other items still out there, the turquoise horsehead earrings, black ankle boots, and a black leather binder. I have to assume that it was a binder that her father was given in some way, because the clasp on it was unique and it had either a Buick or a GM reference on it. But here I've got some better photos of this stuff we can look at here. There we go. It's kind of a recreation of the earring and the type of boots that she was wearing at the time. We know that sometimes people who commit these kind of crimes will keep things as souvenirs, particularly jewelry, said Spetzel. They could still be in the custody of the person who did this. Amy's body itself also provided evidence. DNA, 3 hairs from someone other than Amy or her family have been collected and tested. 3 hairs. Not a lot to work with, but thankfully they have something. We have what we call mitochondrial DNA. Comes from bones, hairs, not nuclear DNA that comes from blood, explained Spetzel. But the problem is, with decomposition, we have to be careful with how we utilize that particular DNA. Spetzel said that the DNA technology is just not advanced enough yet to identify Amy's killer. He said investigators have to be careful with the evidence because testing often eats up all of the sample. I have heard of methods of kind of boosting DNA. I don't know if they're ready to be used in this way yet, but essentially where they can take a degraded or a very weak sample, and it's a process they put it through where that sample basically replicates itself over and over, and they're able to get a stronger reading from it effectively. So I don't know if that's kind of along the lines in terms of the technology that they're waiting for with this. You have to be very judicious and pick the right tests. That's all I can really say at this point, said Spetzel. There's really no mechanism right now to take what we have from her body, put it into some kind of database, and kick out a suspect. So obviously they don't have a full-blown DNA profile created from this yet, and they're waiting for the technology to let them do that with, they've got 3 hairs. And who knows if those are all from the same person. Like if this item is, well, these hairs are coming from her body, but just like her dog's hairs were transferred to these items, it could be that those hairs came directly in contact with her from the suspect, but might have also been transferred to her body from the items that she was wrapped in. So not a ton to work with there, but thankfully something. So we talked about a few persons of interest, maybe not the strongest, but then we get to 2021 and a very startling new development indeed. Court documents reveal this. Let's take a look from News 5 Cleveland. Court documents show that in January of 2019, a woman came forward and identified her ex-boyfriend as a suspect in Mihaljevic's murder. Because he has not been charged, we've chosen not to identify the now 64-year-old man. Now, off those first few sentences, first thing I'm thinking, oh, wow, ex-boyfriend, did their relationship go south? Is she angry at him? And that's part of this. Wait until you get into the details here. According to a sworn affidavit from a Bay Village detective, the woman told police at the time of Amy's disappearance, the man and his former girlfriend lived less than 1.5 miles from the shopping center where Mihaljevic was last seen alive. The man worked in Bay Village at the time and had family living there, including a niece in the same grade as Mihaljevic. The woman told investigators that the man did not come home the night that Amy was abducted. Police said the woman indicated that it was unlike the man to disappear and not come home overnight. Investigators said the woman stated that her former boyfriend did call her around 10 p.m. the night of the abduction to ask if she was aware of the news coverage of Amy's disappearance. A detective also said the woman told him that she believed she traveled with her former boyfriend to Ashland County on 1 or more trips. They're looking for someone that would have knowledge of that area. They think that it's someone that's comfortable with that area and would have known this will be a good spot to dump Amy's body and these items. According to investigators, the man's appearance in late 1989 was consistent with one of two major suspect composites obtained via witness interviews. In the affidavit, investigators said in May of 2020, two witnesses who saw Mihaljevic talking with a man at the shopping center the day of her abduction picked the man in question's picture out of a photo lineup as the person that they recalled seeing Amy talking to the day that she was last seen alive. Again, we're talking witness information happening in May of 2020. So, over 30 years after the fact. But they were there on that day, and they're saying that he's a match for the man they saw. On top of all that, police said that gold fibers were found on Amy's clothing. First mention that we're getting of that. The detective told a Cuyahoga County judge that the man in question drove a gold Oldsmobile with a tan interior in 1989 and 1990. According to court records, an FBI agent noted a gold Oldsmobile registered to the man drove through an intersection near where Amy's body was dumped on the day that she was discovered. That is really, really crazy to think that you've got this guy, we've got these kind of gold fibers. What's interesting to me about that is they're saying gold fibers, but then they're describing the interior of his car as tan. So is that a match or not? I'm not quite sure. But then saying that, hey, an FBI agent saw this car that was driving through the day that they discovered Amy, obviously wrote down his plate number, and they've confirmed, yeah, it's this same guy. A Bay Village detective wrote, investigation has not been able to show any reason why the man should have been near Amy's body recovery site on February 8th, 1990. In November of 2019, just days after the 30th anniversary of Amy's abduction, the detective wrote the man in question walked into the Bay Village Police Department and talked to investigators over the course of 2 days. The man walked in on his own. In a sworn affidavit, the detective said the man made very suspicious statements. According to court records, those included that 1989 and 1990 was a dark period in his life, and that the man indicated that he may have met Amy's mother, Margaret, in a bar. The detective wrote that when asked if he ever called Amy prior to her abduction, the man answered, "I could have," and that it could have been a wrong number. Police said when they asked the man if Amy was in his car, he said, "I don't believe so." But when they asked again if it was possible, they said the man said, "Okay, but I don't know what the situation would have been." The detective said the man agreed it was possible that his DNA would be on a curtain found near Amy's body, but said, "I did not put it there," and that his DNA would be on Amy's body if somebody planted it on her. So it's interesting because it sounds like they were trying to phrase questions to him as if they had proof about certain things, and they might, and it's just not been publicly disclosed, because all of his responses sound very defensive in nature, but they sound defensive in a way where he's worried about being caught in a lie, at least based on we're hearing one side of the conversation. So it might be a bit of an unfair assessment, but there's a defensiveness that I'm clearly getting. These are quotes from this documentation. So this isn't a rephrasing of what he said. Investigators said the man agreed to a DNA swab and a polygraph test. Police said the results of the polygraph test were deception indicated. The detective also told the judge that the man did not show up the next day as planned to sign paperwork allowing police to search a storage unit. Police obtained a warrant. They searched the storage units, and they're saying, quote, officers seized evidence. There's no mention of what police took. So then News 5 Cleveland, they actually tried reaching out to the man, calling and texting him. They didn't get any response, but police told them that he's currently homeless and living in his car. So of all the persons of interest that we've discussed and other ones that I bumped into and just didn't discuss here in the video, this sounds extremely compelling. And I'm curious to see where this goes, if this is the person that we've been looking for. And if it is, if they can find the information to move this case forward and maybe file some charges, and we'll see that name hit the newspapers, possibly. New DNA testing begun. This is in 2023. It's definitely not a cold case, like we said at the start of today's episode, because it's always been worked on by someone, said Bay Village detective Jay Ellish, who has been working on the case for 22 years. He said about 20 hairs were recently found on a curtain and blanket they believe Amy was wrapped in when she was found in Ashland County. Those hairs are now being tested at a lab in Virginia for DNA. So we look at these hairs and we try and determine if these hairs are Amy's hairs, or are they any of her family members' hairs, or are they a foreign hair possibly belonging to a suspect, he said. He said they're also re-examining her clothing. We're trying to obtain DNA off the clothing that maybe was never found with DNA testing, that maybe wasn't as advanced a few years back. And it looks like those efforts would work out because we do have more new evidence uncovered, and this information just coming out in October of 2024. We've definitely found some male DNA on Amy's sweatpants that we feel is promising and may result in identifying someone. We're hopeful, said Jay Ellish. Amy's clothing has been resubmitted for testing twice over the past 2 years. So whose DNA is on her clothing? Right now, we don't have the technology in the DNA world to come up with a DNA profile with the small amount that we have, explains Detective Sergeant Ellish. But that technology could be developed very soon. We're being told it might be as close as 6 months to a year. We've been excited a few times with this case. We've learned to hold back and wait so that we're not let down. But this is very exciting what we have. I would say so, because if they can develop this out and actually get a profile on it, then we know it's just a matter of genetic genealogy being applied to it. And at least they kind of know the end person. Then it's going to be up to them to find the evidence and proof to tie it all together to turn that into charges and an arrest. But the first piece is getting that DNA profile. There's a handful of people we feel we would call good suspects. We would definitely compare any DNA on Amy's clothing with them, said Detective Ellish. And just to show more of the effort they've been doing on this case, to date, more than $100,000 has been spent on DNA testing alone in Amy's case. And just reading through all the articles, like I literally felt like I was in a time machine watching the careers change. Like we had one police chief back when she went missing. All of a sudden he phases out. We have a guy that's a young patrolman. He gets to the point of being police chief, retires out. He's now a mayor. We've got a new detective that's on the case. It's amazing how people have been dedicating their lives to this case. And I'm very hopeful that that's going to pay off here very, very soon. Again, we have several items still in the wild, might be somewhere waiting to be discovered, or might be items that someone might recognize seeing somewhere. We've got the earring, kind of with the turquoise horse head on it. We've got the shoes that she was wearing, these kind of low riding type shoes. And then I have, just from the Dateline, just a little picture here. I haven't been able to find this photo, but a picture of the clasp that was on the leather portfolio or kind of journal that she had with her. And it says best in class on it, and it looks like it has a Buick logo right on it. So pretty identifiable and a little more unique than something that would be just, a generic folder that was sold in stores at the time. And of course, there's also the blanket, but the blanket's just not as unique as this item. This curtain, where was it? Whose house was it in? Does someone have a childhood memory of this curtain? If you do, please use the contact information that we have down below and call that in. If you don't want to get on the phone with someone, there is also a website you can go to for the FBI, and you can just submit that tip electronically as well. And last but not least, these composites. FBI is saying they might be leading us down the wrong path, but we don't know. They might not be. These might actually be accurate as well, especially with that information we have about that last person we were talking about, the unnamed man, and how the witnesses at the time pulled him out of the lineup. It was very clear in that court documentation that he matches one of these photos. So maybe these composites, not bad after all. So please take a moment, think First of all, do any of these pieces ring with you? But if they don't, do you have some friends in Ohio that you can share this with? We want to keep the exposure raised. This is a case that's been going on 35 years, has had varying peaks and valleys in terms of people talking about it. There's been a podcast here or there, the Dateline episode. I think ID did a 3-hour special on it as well. We want to keep people aware of this case and hopefully bring that missing piece into play so law enforcement can celebrate a very, very big win that they've been working on for a really long time, bring some answers to this family, and maybe some justice to Amy. Thank you guys so much for spending all this time with me today. You might notice we don't run ads in these presentations. We want you to be able to stay focused on the cases. There's only an ad at the very start and at the very end, and we can only do that because of our amazing supporters. If you'd like to become one, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee. We really appreciate it because it helps keep us here doing what we're doing, helping these families in need. And if you want to see a very good example of that, come back next Friday for a very special episode of Searchlight. I will see you there. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care and join us again next week on the Lord and Arts channel.